you're the Secretary
And I refuse
of
to box
Defense.
myself in based on questioning on a hypothetical.
But you're here asking for $1 trillion, and I want to know how you're going to spend it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump tells you to send troops.
Senator Elizabeth Warren confronts Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with a question that cuts straight to the core of American democracy. How far can a president go in using the U.S. military inside the United States? As Hegseth defends the deployment of National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles in support of ICE operations, Warren pushes for clear limits, accountability, and answers. The exchange exposes deep concerns about civil authority, military readiness, and whether federal power is being stretched beyond constitutional boundaries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So President Trump has deployed the National Guard and then the U.S. Marines to Los Angeles over the objections of state and local officials, saying that the troops are needed to support immigration detention operations that are being carried out by ICE. On Sunday night, the president threatened to deploy ICE agents to other cities around the country that he sees as, quote, the core of the Democrat power center, end quote, specifically mentioning Chicago and New York. Secretary Hegseth, if the president wanted to deploy Marines to Chicago and New York City like he did in Los Angeles, would you carry out that order even if the local governors and mayors objected?
Well, Senator, because Governor Newsom was unwilling to address
that's not
protecting
my question.
federal law enforcement agents in Los Angeles, President Trump had all the authorities, and the Defense Department happily supported defending our ICE agents in the conduct of their job. They have the right as Americans to be able to do their job without being attacked by mobs. And we will protect them in that process. And if other states needed it, we would provide that.
I know that you heard my question. So you would be willing to send troops if the president ordered it to Chicago, New York City? That's right.
Well, thankfully, New York City, unlike California, unlike Gavin Newsom, is willing to step up and address the issue with their local law enforcement.
I will take that as a yes. How about if the president says he wants to send troops to 15 cities? Would you be willing to do that?
Well, Senator, I don't accept your hypothetical because
That's a hypothetical.
Not a real
That's
one.
the question. You're the Secretary of Defense. Would you send troops to 15 cities if the president said do it? Would you do it? 15 cities.
Again, Senator, it's a complete hypothetical lacking any context at all.
You're the Secretary
and I refuse
of
to
Defense.
box myself in based on questioning on a hypothetical.
But you're here asking for $1 trillion, and I want to know how you're going to spend it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump tells you to send troops to 15 American cities, are you going to spend the money and send the troops?
Thankfully, we're spending money on securing our southern border, a way the previous administration abandoned and allowed 21 million illegals to enter our country. So defending our homeland is a real serious priority under this administration, and we're doing it.
I understand the question about defense. Secretary Hegseth, about 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines have been sent to LA. Is there a number of troops deployed to American cities over the objections of governors and mayors at which you would be concerned that we are undermining our national defense?
Senator, we've spent 2 decades guarding other people's borders. We think at the Defense Department it's about time we shore up ours.
So that's my question. Is there a number at which sending those troops to Los Angeles or Chicago or New York starts to undermine our ability to defend ourselves around the globe? Is there a number?
Senator, we look at capabilities and readiness around the globe all the time, and we're quite satisfied with our capabilities to defend the homeland, and we'll provide more if and when it's...
So we are satisfied with our capabilities. Let me just ask, have you actually done the analysis and figured out how many troops you can deploy domestically before you start to undermine readiness around the world? Have you done that analysis?
Yes, ma'am.
Then would you let the rest of us in on it? We are the Senate Armed Services Committee, and you're here to ask for $1 trillion. What's the number?
We've got contingencies and plans for any number of capabilities should governors be unable, as Gavin Newsom has been, to actually secure his own federal agents in their cities.
How many troops can you deploy domestically before you start to cut into our readiness internationally?
As I said, previous administrations deployed our National Guard all around the globe in numbers
We have a
far
number,
beyond
but
what we
you're
were capable
just
of
not gonna
supporting.
tell
So
us.
limited
So let me
contingencies
ask you
inside the
one
United
more
States to
question.
protect federal law
If the Supreme
enforcement
Court
is
orders
doable.
you to remove troops from American city streets, will you do so?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, if the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American cities, will you do so?
As I've said, Senator, I don't believe district courts should determine national security policy, but if the
That was
Supreme
not my
Court rules
question.
on a topic, we will abide by that.
Okay. During her press conference last week, Secretary Noem said, "We are staying here to liberate the city from its mayor and its governor, people who were elected by a majority of voters." Secretary Hegseth is saying he is ready to deploy more troops and won't tell us what the implications are for our national defense. This is un-American and it makes us unsafe. I wish our Republican colleagues would speak up.
The exchange between Senator Elizabeth Warren and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth highlights a profound shift in how executive power is being asserted inside the United States. Warren's questioning is not rooted in partisanship or immigration policy preferences. It is grounded in constitutional structure. Her concern centers on whether the deployment of U.S. troops into American cities is becoming a routine political tool rather than a last resort response to genuine national emergencies. Hegseth repeatedly affirms his willingness to carry out presidential orders to deploy troops domestically, even in the face of objections from governors and mayors. What stands out is not simply his answer, but what he refuses to provide alongside it: limits. He offers no clear legal threshold, no numerical cap on troop deployments, and no public standard for determining when domestic use of military force begins to undermine national defense readiness. This absence of specificity is especially alarming given that the administration is requesting nearly $1 trillion in defense spending while declining to explain how domestic operations affect global force posture. Historically, the use of federal troops inside the United States has been rare and narrowly defined. From Reconstruction to civil rights enforcement in the 1950s and 1960s, presidents invoked extraordinary authority under extraordinary circumstances, often in response to states openly defying federal law or constitutional rights. Warren's questions reflect an understanding that these precedents were controversial even at the time, and that expanding them into routine policy risks hollowing out long-standing norms that separate military power from civilian governance. The readiness issue Warren raises is not hypothetical. The National Guard and Marine Corps already face recruitment shortfalls, retention challenges, and equipment strain. Extended domestic deployments divert training hours, disrupt unit cohesion, and complicate deployment cycles. When Hegseth insists that readiness remains intact while declining to disclose the analysis behind that claim, Congress is left unable to assess whether political decisions are quietly reshaping military priorities without legislative consent. Equally troubling is the framing of local political disagreement as a security failure. By portraying governors and mayors as unwilling or incapable of maintaining order, Hegseth redefines federalism itself. In this framework, dissent becomes justification for escalation, and military force becomes a substitute for political resolution. That logic carries serious implications. Once normalized, it allows any future administration to characterize opposition-controlled cities as threats requiring federal intervention backed by armed force. Warren's final line of questioning exposes the democratic stakes. If courts order troops removed from city streets, compliance becomes the last remaining check. Hegseth's answer, respect for Supreme Court rulings but skepticism toward lower courts, signals a hierarchy of obedience that places executive judgment above immediate judicial oversight. That posture narrows the space for lawful resistance and accelerates the concentration of power within the executive branch. This exchange is ultimately about restraint. Democracies depend not just on what leaders can do, but on what they choose not to do. Warren presses for transparency, limits, and shared authority. Hegseth's responses reflect a Defense Department increasingly aligned with executive ambition rather than institutional caution. The unresolved tension between those positions raises a critical question for Congress and the public alike: whether the United States is prepared to accept a future where domestic troop deployments are no longer extraordinary, but expected.